It's wild to think that 2 centuries after his death, one man can still stir up so much debate. He's one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, divisive figures in all of history. So today, we're going to unravel the story of how a man became a myth, basically in his own lifetime. We're talking about Napoleon Bonaparte.
It really all starts with an image, doesn't it? Just think about it for a second. You see the silhouette of this hat, and you know exactly who we're talking about, instantly. That right there, that's the power of the brand that Napoleon built. But how did he get so iconic that his hat is, more recognizable than most countries' flags?
Okay, to really wrap your head around the colossal shadow this guy casts, look at this number, 80,000. That's roughly how many books have been written about him since he died. That's more than one book for every single day that has passed. It's an absolute record in publishing. Mind-blowing.
And this isn't just some dusty old historical fascination either. Nope. In the age of the internet, he is the second most searched for historical figure on the entire planet. So what is the secret? What's behind this enduring, global obsession? Well, let's get into it. So our story, it doesn't begin in some gilded hall of power. Not at all. It begins on the rugged shores of an island, with a boy who just did not fit in.
Yeah, Napoleon was born Napoleone di Bonaparte. He was a proud Corsican from a family of, minor nobility. But when he got to military school in France, he was a total outsider. His classmates, all these sons of fancy French aristocrats, they made fun of his thick accent. They even twisted his name into this really cruel nickname, La Paille au nez, which literally means straw in the nose. And, being alienated like that, it just forged this incredibly intense bond with his homeland. This quote, it just reveals how deeply Corsican he really felt. In the beginning, France wasn't some country to love. For him, it was a country to conquer.
And conquer it, he did. I mean, look at this timeline. At 16, he's a junior officer. Just 8 years later, his tactical genius at the siege of Toulon makes him a general at the astonishing age of 24. And by 30, he's the most powerful man in France. His rise wasn't just fast, it was completely vertical.
So you have to ask, how is a rise like that even possible for an outsider? Well, the answer is the French Revolution. It was pure chaos, and that chaos just smashed the old world order. Before, only guys with ancient noble titles could get to the top. But the revolution said, nope, talent is what matters, not who your dad was. For a fiercely ambitious and, let's face it, brilliant young man like Napoleon, this chaos, it was the opportunity of a lifetime.
And Napoleon didn't just climb that ladder of opportunity. Oh no. He got to the top, kicked it away, and started building an empire.
First and foremost, the man was a military genius. Full stop. His campaigns are still studied at war colleges today. He had this incredible ability to inspire fanatical loyalty and just outmaneuver his opponents with breathtaking speed. And his crowning achievement? That came at Austerlitz, the Battle of the Three Emperors, where he faced the combined armies of Russia and Austria and pulled off one of the most decisive victories in all of history.
But here's the thing that sometimes gets lost. He was as brilliant a builder as he was a general. While he's waging all these wars, he's also radically remaking France. He called his reforms masses of granite, institutions designed to last forever. His Napoleonic Code, for example, was revolutionary. It replaced this jumbled mess of old feudal laws with a single logical system, cementing legal equality for all citizens. And so many of these foundations, the central bank, the public high schools, they're still the bedrock of French society today.
All this ambition, it led to this one moment of just pure political theater. It's 1804 at Notre Dame Cathedral. The Pope is there, ready to do the honors. But Napoleon doesn't wait. He literally takes the crown from the Pope's hands and places it on his own head. The message could not have been clearer. My power comes from me. Not from God, not from tradition. I am a self-made emperor.
And in his own mind, his ambition and France's ambition were the exact same thing. So was he a patriot, totally dedicated to his country's greatness? Or was France just the vehicle for his own personal glory? With Napoleon, it's pretty much impossible to untangle the two.
But empires built on the genius of one man, well, they tend to be fragile. And the higher Napoleon soared, the more catastrophic his fall was going to be.
The big turning point was 1812. By this point, he really believed he was invincible. He leads his massive Grande Armée deep into Russia. And yeah, he captures Moscow, but it was a trap. The brutal Russian winter just destroyed his forces. The retreat across the Berezina River was so horrific, so deadly, that it gave birth to a French expression they still use for any total disaster. C'est la Berezina.
After Russia, the collapse was just swift. It was like a cascade. Europe's old powers, they sensed he was weak, and they all ganged up on him. There was the devastating defeat at Leipzig, then the invasion of France itself, and finally, his own marshals, the very men he had raised from nothing, they forced him to face reality.
And so, in April 1814, the emperor of most of Europe is stripped of all his power and is given sovereignty over this tiny little island off the coast of Italy. Now, for anyone else, this would have been the end of the story. But for Napoleon, this was just an intermission. And this brings us to the final, and maybe the most remarkable, act of his entire life. This is the story of how he transformed his ultimate military defeat into his greatest victory, the creation of his own legend. Just 10 months after being exiled, he pulls off his most audacious gamble yet. He escapes Elba, lands in France with just a handful of followers, and starts marching towards Paris. The soldiers that are sent to arrest them, they see him and they defect to his side. He retook the throne in what's known as the Flight of the Eagle. I mean, it's just incredible. A reconquest that proved his magnetic hold on the French people was as strong as ever.
But this epic comeback, known as the 100 Days, it was short-lived. A panicked Europe reassembled its armies, and on a rain-soaked field in Belgium, his story as a conqueror came to a final, definitive end at the Battle of Waterloo.
But here's the twist. Defeat became his ultimate propaganda tool. He's exiled again, this time to the desolate rock of St. Helena, way out in the middle of the Atlantic. And it's here that he begins his last, and maybe his most enduring campaign, the battle for his legacy. With nothing left to do but talk, he dictated his memoirs. And in this final act of genius, he completely rewrote his own story. He cast himself not as a failed emperor who bled Europe dry, but as a revolutionary hero, a martyr who suffered and died for the glory of France.
And you know what? His version of the story won. By 1840, France was demanding the return of its emperor. His remains were brought all the way from St. Helena to Paris in this grand procession called the Return of the Ashes. The former tyrant was welcomed home as a national hero, solidifying the very myth he had so carefully crafted in exile.
So in the end, his legacy is this huge paradox. He was a modernizer who literally built the foundations of the modern state. He was also a dictator whose wars cost millions and millions of lives. So the question for us today is the same as it was 2 centuries ago. When you see that hat, what do you see? A hero who forged a nation, a tyrant who bled a continent, or the ultimate master of spin who made absolutely sure we would never, ever forget him?